Welcome to our video on the importance of audience analysis in technical and business writing. Now, audience analysis is very important because you want to make sure the text or the document you write will be appropriate for your audience, that they should be able to follow it and understand it, read it comfortably. There shouldn't be a mismatch between what you have written and who is reading it. But there's a big problem. And the problem is, most of the time, especially if you're working for, let's say, a big corporation, the writers do not have access to the end users. You have a rough idea, of course. In general, you know who is going to read your document, but you can never be 100% clear and certain about the type of audience you're writing for. So what do? Well, you use approximation methods. As they say, perfect is the enemy of the good. So to create a good document with some sense of appropriateness for the audience requires you use approximation methods. Now, one of them is the famous readability indexes. A readability index measures the kind of schooling in terms of grades a reader must have to understand your text. So it basically analyzes the kind of words you are using, the length of sentences, whether you are using technical jargon, etc., and says, well, this text can be understood by someone with a 9th grade education or 12th grade education, etc. Here are some of the well-known readability indexes: Automated Readability Index, Flash Kincaid, Gunning Fogg, Coleman Liu, Linzier Wright Readability Formula, Smog Index, Space Score, New Dale Charles Score, Fry Readability Graph, and Raygor Readability Estimate. You can Google these and get more information. Now, another approximation method is by occupational categories. If you know, for example, that your text will be read by the higher management executive level, they are really interested in the overall view of the forest. So an executive summary would be perfect for such an audience, unless they want something more. But if you are writing it, let's say, for technical support or quality insurance staff or engineering and development audience, then you need to be a lot more detailed. You need to go through, write whole procedures step by step. So more work would go into such a text. So by just knowing the occupational titles of your readers, you can make an attempt to come close to creating something that would be appropriate for your audience. Now, international audience is another matter. If you know you're writing in the United States or England, and if your text will be read in Russia, Turkey, or Singapore, or an African country, you may want to take into consideration that cultural phrases and idioms hardly translates well into other cultural contexts. So try to use just plain English. And especially when you're writing dates, units, and measurements, I would say pay extra attention, because sometimes, like in the United States, the month and date, the way it's written is just the other way around, reversed in Europe, for example. So in order to avoid any misunderstandings, pay attention to those cultural differences. Now, at the end of the day, whether a document or a text is appropriate for this audience is best understood if you can measure the degree of appropriateness. Now, how do you measure that if a text reached its goal? So what is the goal of a text? The way I define it, a good text, especially technical document, changes the behavior of the audience in a positive direction. And that's the most realistic, real measurement I can think of. If after reading your text, the audience continues to do the same thing in the same old way, it means your document didn't make any difference at all. So by conclusion, I would say that text was not the proper one for that audience. But again, it's not easy to measure such change in behavior. For example, let's say you are writing a camera installation guide, and by using your guide, the installers out in the field installed 25% more cameras per month. Now, you may be tempted to say that's a positive change in the direction of the behavior of my end users, who are field reps and installers. But what if, after having the cameras installed, there are complaints that these cameras, by looking at your document, cannot be configured as easily? What if the customer relations or technical support people start to get 10 or 15% more calls? Now, would that mean that your document is now not as successful, not as appropriate for the audience? So the point is, measuring how good a fit your document is to your audience depends on the questions you ask and the assumptions you make and the definitions you make. It is not an easy process, but still you have to do your best to make sure that your document will be the appropriate one for your audience. I wish you good luck and hope to see you in the next video.